Even though I don't think about it on a daily basis, I do have nightmares that he's out and still chasing me. Normally, I wake up because I'm screaming. Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about when I say disfigured. That is not the man that I married or knew. He was too perverted and too evil. I believe that this picture shows the true Jagata Pearson Sr. Evil, cold, vicious, and lifeless. No soul. When I look at this picture, it makes me wonder how much fear that Erica endured before, she passed. I don't think I properly grieved. There's some cries, some shouts, some hollering. I think all of that is still down deep inside of me. I won't allow myself to let out what I know is still in me that needs to come out. It's because I feel like it might be that button that's gonna push me over. Well, I was raised by both parents, and there was nine children. There was 6 girls and 3 boys. I grew up in a Christian home where my mom made sure we went to church, Sunday school, all those things. I met Jagata in the summer going into my senior year. He was the best boyfriend any young lady would want. And I think that he did love me. And so when he proposed to me and asked me to marry him, I said yes. But little did I know, that was when I let the devil into my life. This is actually a picture of our wedding reception. My mom gave it to us. She couldn't afford anything big, so she just gathered a few family and friends around the dining room table. I was pretty excited that day. I really thought that this was the beginning of something great. I thought this was the beginning of what every young teenage girl dreams of, a home with white picket fence and having a couple kids around the yard on bicycles, and that was my dream. That was my dream for us. But his family did not come to the wedding, neither did they come to the reception. Jagata showed up by himself. I didn't want to make him feel bad, so I didn't question him as far as why. When I look at it now, that should have been a sign, but I guess we just overlooked it. I really wish that I could just take this time back and all the way up to the day that he proposed, where I could have had an opportunity to say no, and my life as well as my children's life would be very different. Once we moved in with Jagata's grandmother, I realized that she didn't say much. She treated me okay, she just didn't talk to me a lot. Then one morning, after Jagata had left to go to work, his grandmother came in the kitchen while I was cleaning dishes. And I noticed that she looked out the window to make sure that he was gone. She turned around, and these were her words. She said, Don't start nothing with him that you can't finish. And I'm like, what is she saying? But she was a woman of little words. And she turned around and she walked out the kitchen like she had never said anything to me. When his grandmother warned me that day, it literally stirred and spooked my spirit. And I felt like that she knew him better than I did. I believe they wanted to warn me because they probably had seen previous incident and it probably was pretty bad. I didn't know anything. I was just young and dumb. Jagator's reaction when I told him I was pregnant was excitement. He was very excited about having a child. Shortly after that, I would say maybe about another month and a half, I was sitting in his grandmother's house. Every day he gets home, he get out the car, he give me a smack on the lips.
How was your day?
Let me in.
But this particular day, he said, come on, let's go in the house. And I said, what's wrong? That was an old man who used to cut grass across the street. He accused me of looking across the street at this old man as if I was interested in him or something.
What are you really doing when I'm not here?
Jagator, I don't know what you're talking about.
He said, you waiting for me to come home, but you watching that man when he cutting grass and everything. And I was like, Jagator, that's not true, that's not true. He grabbed my hair and yanked it as hard as he could. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor and he's standing over me, screaming at me.
I expect my wife to be faithful. You understand?
I looked up and I saw his eyes. They were still his eyes, but they looked like they didn't have a care. It was just a blind look. It was as if, who are you? Suddenly, he just snapped out of it, walked away as if nothing had never happened. I didn't share with anybody, of course. And after that, I just, I was like, he went from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. I mean, what made him act like this? And then the next day, it made me understand what his grandmother said even more clearer, because the next day, when I questioned him about it, he didn't want to talk about it. And he acted like it just did not happen. And I had never experienced anything like that in my life. So here I was that day. I was a changed person. This was not the man that I married. Generational abuse is real. The children of one generation watches the parents or the grandparents being abused, and they think that that's just the way it is. I feel like that's what happened to me. My grandmother and my mother, they were so silent about it. They never did anything about it besides, take pills. I definitely wasn't gonna tell nobody that my husband had hit me or anything like that. I might have did something wrong. It must have been me. All these thoughts start coming in your head to make you rationalize yourself that it wasn't his fault. When our son was born, I thought that was going to end all of the abuse. I really did. He was happy he had a son, and he was a good father. One day I was looking at him playing with our son, and I thought to myself, maybe this is what it took for him to change. But little did I know that it would get worse. I recall one day I was in the kitchen and I was preparing a meal. My son was in my arms and he was crying. And Jagator was upstairs sleeping. And so he hollered down a couple times for the baby to be quiet. I was trying my best to quiet the baby, The baby just kept crying.
Keep it down, damn it!
I'm working on it.
And I spoke back like I'm trying my best.
Keep it down!
But whatever it was enough to set him off, which don't take a lot to set him off. He came down the stairs, and I'm holding the child, and he just go off and swing and hit me. Not realizing that, you know, I could have ducked and he would hit the child or anything like that. I immediately laid the child on the couch because I didn't want him to harm my baby. We began to fight. I was hitting him back. The next thing I know, there was a knock at the door. It was my neighbor. Jagada, being a coward, he would go immediately up the stairs so he wouldn't have to look at her. I think that was her way of stopping what was going on. I truly thank God for that type of neighbor we had. She saved my life. But she don't want to see me hurt or the baby hurt or things like that. If I could turn back the time, I would have been left just for my son's sake, because he saw too much, and I believe it affected him a lot from that day forward. Jagada was a licensed minister. He was an ordained elder, and he was studying because he said God had called him to pastor. So at church, Jagada portrayed to be this man of faith. But at home, he was a different person. Jagada had a big sexual appetite, and it consumed him. They were never acts that a preacher, a man of God, would ask his wife to do. It was no longer about intimacy. It was all about him and him tormenting me in a different way. And so if I didn't have sex with him, it was gonna be hours and hours of him falsely accusing me of having sex with somebody else. But it was anything to get under my skin. Anything. He intimidated me and forced me into sexual acts that I did not want to participate in. The level of sexual abuse that I endured, I call it rape, because I endured. If I can say it without saying it in a bad way, I lived in hell within them walls. No matter what happened the day before, when I woke up, I tried to forget about it and start afresh. I remember one day, Jagada got upset about something, and it became an argument.
Nobody's telling me what to do in my own home.
I don't have to be spoken to like this.
And instead of me sitting there, standing there arguing with him when I know it wasn't gonna do any good, you know, I decided to walk away. But before I could walk away, he went in the kitchen drawer and he grabbed a knife. And when he grabbed a knife, you know, the fear just went to another level. Felt like that my whole head was gonna cave in and I was just gonna smother and die right there. He would give me a stare, an evil stare. And he would be like, I wish you were just dead. And so I ran out the door, and I ran next door to a friend of mine's house. Then I told her, Jagada had put a knife on me. She asked me, did I want her to call the police? And I told her, I said, no, just call my mama. My sister Erica and my mother came to my house to get me. My mother pushed past him and went into the house. Then he threw her on the floor and started threatening her.
Don't you move, both of you.
Erica said that he was standing over my mom with a knife, demanding that if she don't leave, he was gonna kill her.
Now where is she? Tell me.
Jagada?
Erica said that she just started screaming and hollering. And a man who lived in the neighborhood heard my sister screaming and hollering. And so he came over to see what was going on. And he said, let her up.
Son, you don't want to do this.
Jagada let my mom up, and then that's when her and Erica got out of there. As angry as he was, he probably would have stabbed my mom. After all of that, she still didn't tell me to leave him. She just pretty much just forgave him, and we moved on. Just be a good wife no matter what he say or do. I used to pray every day. I say, Lord, don't let me die by the hands of this man. I knew that he wanted to kill me. I just didn't know when, and I just didn't know how to get out. Oh, wow. I hate looking at this picture. When I see this picture, all I see is evil. The look that he gave me when I snapped this picture, he looked at me as if you don't walk away right now, you're gonna regret it. I probably had my cell phone in my hand and just snapped the picture because I was always trying to make him happy, but nothing that I did or could do could make him happy. And so, you see it for yourself. When he getting ready for bed and he looking like this, it probably was a hard night for me. I believe that Jagada was living a fantasy life, tormenting me. I believe it brought excitement to his life, to see me always afraid, to see me always on edge, to see me always trying to appease him. I feel that he knew that I was really afraid of him because he lived to make me miserable. I recall one night, Jagada was reading and studying his Bible. And when he studied, he didn't just study with a Bible, he studied with other books and dictionaries and things like that. I never could understand how somebody so evil could even look at the Bible. And so I began to tell him that what he was doing was dangerous and that God was going to deal with him.
You're gonna have to answer for your actions, Jagada.
One thing the Bible say that a husband's supposed to love his wife like Christ loved the church. I said, but you act like you hate me. And I think something hit him. I can't say what it was. And so he laid there for a minute. He just got up, went and got him a box and put all his books and Bibles and stuff in it and put it in the shed. I asked him why. He told me he just didn't want to have anything to do with the Bible anymore. I think that he did it because he knew he was losing this battle between evil and good. And I think that night, evil won. Once he turned his back on God, I knew things was going to only get worse for me. One night, he called my mother's house. I didn't want to talk to him, but I did.
What do you want?
When he called, he sounded as if he was remorseful. And he was just begging for us to come back and how much he loved us and he's not going to do it again. Once I told him I didn't want to come back, I wanted to stay away, he began to tell me goodbye, and he loved us. And the words he was saying and how he was saying it, I knew that he was talking about death.
Why would you say that?
And so I began to tell him, don't talk like that, don't say that, what's wrong with you? He said, you know, if I can't have you, I just rather die. And so I began to tell him, I'm on my way home. Soon as I opened the front door, I could smell the gas in the apartment.
Jagata?
He was actually sitting on the couch, like his head back. And then I'm like, Jagata, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm okay, I'm okay. And then he stands up, and you know, of course I go to hugging him. I'm like, don't do that no more. So when I looked up, I saw the curtain move. And when I did, I pulled him back, and the window was wide open. He was not trying to kill himself. The gas was going right out the window. And he looked at me as if, it got you back, didn't it? And he went up the stairs, end the conversation, like it had never happened. And I feel like to this day that that's how much control he knew he had over me. He knew all he had to do was some simple, stupid stuff, because I didn't want to see him dead, even though he was trying to kill me. I remember one day I had put our son on the school bus, and at that time we had a baby girl. After I came back from putting him on the bus, Jagata and our daughter was sitting on the couch. And so I sat down on the couch with them, and I began to ask him what was wrong. And he just began to tell me that he was tired of living, and he didn't see nothing worth living. I got scared that he was going to try to do a murder-suicide or something like that. And so I just openly said, Jagata, I hope you ain't got no gun in this house. You promised me that we was not gonna have no gun in the house. So with me constantly talking and him not really saying I don't have one, it led me to know he had a gun.
Jagata, tell me where the gun is.
The more the time was passing, the more anxious I was becoming. So I convinced him to please show me the gun. I didn't let him know I was upset with him or anything, because I didn't want it to go, you know, an opposite direction. All I thought about was, you know, he's gonna kill me. And so I lived for many, many years believing that I was gonna die by his hands. When I saw the gun, I began to just convince him that I don't want him to hurt me or hurt himself or anything. He told me that he's not finna do anything to me. He said, I'm not gonna go to prison for you. You ain't worth me going to prison for. He used to give me the look. You just worthless. I don't even know why I deal with you. That's the mindset. That's an evil, demonic mind to make you think you're greater than somebody else. Eventually, he gave me the gun. I just believe that if I had not talked him out that gun, our son probably would have came home that day from school, and his sister probably been there crying over 2 dead bodies. I do believe that. Jagata paranoia was getting worse and worse because he had figured out that I was talking to other people about our relationship. By this time, my parents and my siblings too, they all knew, you know, that Jagata was abusive to me. I assumed that he knew that I was telling other people how bad things were at home. There was even a couple times I caught him spying. I recall one day where I had just gotten home And my aunt, she had called me.
Hello?
And while we talking, the phone seemed like it was staticky. But then all of a sudden, it got to where it was echoing.
Do you hear that?
Seemed like I hear somebody talking.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that? Do you hear that?
I said, just keep talking so I can see where it's coming from.
Hello? Hello?
As I went to where the sound was, it seemed like it's coming from up under the house.
Hello? Hello?
As I went down the stairs, I can still hear it, and it was coming from under the house.
Hello? Hello?
When I got under there and I saw the system set up, I was afraid, because I'm like, what is this? It was one of those box tape recorders that you can't even find no more. And it had some wires going to a phone, like a house phone. Then those wires was going up through the house. And I told her, I said, you ain't gonna believe this. I said, but it's a recorder, a phone, and everything up under here. I believe he was spying to try to find some type of way that I was not faithful to him. And I believe it was a plot for murder. Now I got a reason to murder her. It appears to me that every abusive situation that I was placed in, it made me only think about, what could he do next? And I knew that if I had a left, he was gonna stalk me to death. So looking at this picture, I wish that we would not have gotten that tight, because then Jagada wouldn't have never went to their house, never went to their house looking for me if me and her had not been together for about the last 6 months. I remember one night, so I was in another room saying my prayers for the night, and as I walked into the bedroom, Jagada was awake, and I could sense that it was gonna be one of those nights. He wanted me to do something that I didn't want to do, something that he knew I didn't want to do. And it wasn't even about the distastefulness of it. It's the way he demanded it. It's the way he said it. You gonna do it or else. And then I'm looking in his eyes, and now the black is like turning like red. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this man is possessed. And I begged him not to do it, but he just didn't care. And when he was finished, he laid over and he went to sleep. And I told the Lord, I said, Lord, if you let me live to see in the morning, I'm out of here and I'm not coming back. When I was leaving, I heard this voice say, when you leave this time, cut off all communication, because if you don't, it's gonna be your last time. I didn't tell my mama, I didn't tell none of my siblings or nobody where I was. I was in hiding for about 30 days. No communication from me. It ain't no telling what was going through his mind. But I knew that Jagada would hunt me down and kill me. There was no doubt about it. And I remember that I was so afraid. His whole purpose was about finding me. And so he started pretty much stalking my family. I remember about a week after he went to my sister's house looking for me, I got a phone call from my brother, who was a police officer in Mobile. He told me there was a fire at my sister's home and I needed to get home. My brother tells us that Erica and Steve, they didn't make it. To hear that Erica and Steve was dead, it was almost like unreal. I felt like that my best friend was gone. And I felt like that I was no longer in my body. I felt like I had an out-of-body experience, like, and I felt like this can't be true, this is not true. So we had this emotion, this feeling where everybody was just hugging on each other and crying, and it was just a horrible scene, you know. About an hour later, my brother came out and told us more bad news, that they believed somebody had broke in the house, and then he said they were shot and stabbed. I could feel myself like I was there, but it's like I wasn't there. I just didn't feel like I was me. I feel like a void. Something had been torn out of me. When I woke up the next morning, I still felt empty. I still felt void. I felt like somebody had just ripped my insides out. I was so in shock until I couldn't really cry, but I can feel the pain. My heart was just aching. I feel sad. I feel hurt. Not only do I hurt for them, I hurt for her children and her grandchildren. You know, it was early, probably 6 o'clock, and I almost wishing that it was a dream. You know, you wishing that you don't slept this off. You wake up and it's still real. That Sunday, my phone rang. It was my brother. He said, I think Jagada had something to do with Eric and Steve murder. And when he said that, I almost fell on my face. I almost fell out my chair on my face. And I was like, oh my God, I mean, I didn't have that idea. And evil as Jagada was, I never thought that he would be the one that killed Eric and Steve. Why? There's no purpose to that. And the first thing that I remembered was the very first day I left him, I was at Erica's house, and the police came and escorted me into hiding. And so I think that he chose Eric and Steve because he figured that they knew where I was. He was searching for me and looking for me because that was the last place he saw me. And he went to one of my sister's home that night, and pretty much he was begging her to tell where I was or to call me for him. And her husband ended up telling him, say, you know, she said she's not coming back. He just became furious.
Authorities say Pearson murdered Erica and Steve Langford Friday, then set their home on fire.
Did you kill Erica and Steven?
Did you?
No, I'm asking, did you?
No, I'm asking you, did you?
Then why did they have you in cuffs right now?
Ask them.
So are you saying you didn't do this?
That's right.
What gets me on there is it showed just how cocky he is and how smart mouth and nasty attitude, and that's what I had to deal with for 30 years. That throws it all back at you. Never gonna fault himself or blame himself. He didn't do anything, and that's how he always was. I believe he did it to hurt me, and so that I can live in, in pain the rest of my life. And I think he did it because he lost the control that he wanted to have over them to tell him where I was. And Jagada would get very angry about anything that he could not control. Once Jagada entered the house, Erica was in the kitchen and Steve was in the bed. And when he opened the door, he immediately shot her 3 times in her upper torso. Steve ran out the bedroom to see what was going on, and there he confronted Jagada with the gun and Jagata ended up getting the best of him and shot him in his left temple. Jagata grabbed the biggest of the butcher knife, and while my sister was crawling on the floor, he stabbed her 4 times in her back. And they said that's what killed her. And then he set the piles of clothes on fire, which caused the house to catch a fire. They never found the gun, but they found a shotgun in the truck. And along with the shotgun was 2 long bullets. So I had talked to the lieutenant, and he told me that I believe that if he had gotten a hold to you, that he was gonna use those bullets, one for you and one for him. And I realized that I probably was gonna be Jagata's next victim. Personal situation caused my sister and her husband to lose their lives. I don't know if the pictures did it or that last video did it, but it's just like something came over on me, you know. I know that it's not my fault, it's Jagata's fault. It was never anything wrong with me. But it took me many years of torment, fear, walking on eggshells, paranoid, depressed. It took many years of that for me to realize it was never anything wrong with me. It was always you. I had to get it. And so for a long time, I lived under so much guilt.
They called me a deserter. Maybe they were right. When the artillery fell silent for a moment that winter, I ran. Not from battle, but toward a name. Her name. Anna. The one I'd left behind in the town now crawling with uniforms not our own. They told me love was weakness, that a soldier's heart must belong to orders, not women. But orders don't breathe warmth into your hands when the frost sets in. I walked 50 kilometers through snow and silence, carrying a single image. Her face under candlelight. By the time I reached her door, the candle had burned out, and she was wearing my coat, the one I'd left her for warmth. But another man was inside it. My name is Jakub Lesniak, 32 years old when the snow swallowed the Eastern Front. Before the war, I was a mechanic from Lodz, a man who believed machines were honest. They did only what you made them do. Human hearts, I would later learn, are not so simple. I grew up among iron and oil. My father worked in the textile mills, my mother in silence. She prayed to saints for peace. I prayed for noise, the kind that drowns doubt. When I joined the army, I told her it was for the country. In truth, it was for direction. War gives you lines to follow, uniforms to hide inside. It was easier than facing my own reflection in the cracked mirror of our flat. Anna worked in the bakery near the depot. She had soft hands, always dusted with flour, and eyes that never lingered too long. When she smiled, it looked like she'd just forgiven someone. I fell in love with that mercy. We spoke in small sentences, the kind you whisper when you're afraid they'll vanish if spoken too loudly. I gave her my winter coat before I left for the front. "It's nothing," I said, but she knew it meant everything. Inside the pocket, I left a photo of us, the one where she's holding my cigarette like a secret. The war stripped us of seasons. Days turned to hours, nights to trembling. In the trenches, we became ghosts before dying. When the Germans retreated and the Soviets advanced, the lines blurred, and so did loyalty. By then, the cause meant little. We fought shadows and the echo of boots. One night, a young lieutenant told me our town had been occupied again. He said anyone left behind would likely be sent east, to camps, to silence. I couldn't sleep. Every crack of ice sounded like her name breaking. That night, I deserted. Some say fear drives desertion, but mine was love, or what I thought was love. Maybe both. The border between them is thinner than a trigger. I took only what fit in my satchel, 1 pistol, 2 letters from her, and a loaf of black bread. I walked west, hiding in barns, stealing from trains, following the smoke of villages still alive. Every mile I told myself this was courage. Every mile it sounded less convincing. When I reached the outskirts of the town, dawn was a pale wound on the horizon. The church tower stood broken. The bell melted to silence. I found her street half buried in snow. Children's toys frozen on the steps, doors nailed shut. And then, her window. Light inside. Movement. I remember pressing my hand against the glass, seeing the shape of a man's coat. My coat. I didn't knock. I waited until morning. When the door opened, she stepped out laughing, his hand on her back. She wore the coat, buttoned to her throat, as if afraid the cold might find its way between them. She saw me before I spoke. The color left her face, then came back, like guilt remembered. Yakub, she said, just my name, nothing else. I should have walked away. I should have remembered what the uniform once meant. Instead, I followed them. I followed them through the ruined streets like a ghost stalking its own past. Snow muffled my footsteps, but not my heartbeat. I watched as they entered what had once been the mayor's house, the one with green shutters and a balcony where roses used to hang before the shelling. She closed the door behind them. For the first time, I felt what the war had trained out of us. Hesitation. It wasn't fear of death, but of truth. Because I knew that once I knocked, I could never unlearn what waited on the other side. I waited for hours. The sun rose pale, spilling across broken walls. The church bell, long melted, gave no sound. I walked the perimeter of the house twice, then sat against the gate, pistol in hand, as if guarding the memory of us. I told myself she must have done it to survive. That the man, the officer, had power, bread, maybe safety. Love in war becomes currency. You trade affection for protection, kisses for rations, loyalty for life. But the image of her smile, the one she'd once reserved only for me, wouldn't leave. It repeated like a wound that refused to close. By nightfall, I broke in. Inside, the house smelled of smoke and soap. Civilization, that rarest scent. I climbed the stairs quietly, passing portraits of men in uniforms from another age. At the end of the hallway, I saw light spilling from a door slightly ajar. She was sitting on the bed, hair undone, reading a letter by candlelight. The officer's coat, my coat, was folded beside her. I couldn't breathe. Every breath felt like betrayal inhaled. She looked up. Our eyes met. Time fractured. Jakub, she whispered, as if speaking to a ghost. I should have cried. Instead, I smiled. The way soldiers do before doing something unforgivable. The man stirred behind her. He was young, barely 20, wearing a Polish insignia but speaking Russian when he woke. He saw me, froze, then reached for his pistol. Mine was faster. One shot. It wasn't rage, it was reflex. The kind drilled into you after years of surviving the impossible. He fell without sound. The candle flickered. She screamed my name, then covered her mouth, as if afraid the world would hear. I stood there, pistol still raised, trembling not from cold, but from recognition. I had killed not an enemy, but a mirror. She knelt beside him, blood soaking through her dress. Her voice broke. He saved me, Jakub. He saved me from the soldiers. You don't understand. But understanding was a luxury for men who hadn't lived in trenches. My mind rejected nuance. I saw only betrayal, painted in her tears. I turned away. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. That love and hate are twins wearing each other's faces. I left before dawn. The snow had stopped, leaving the air sharp and clean. Behind me, smoke rose from the town. Someone had set fire to a storehouse, maybe to erase evidence, maybe to warm the dead. I walked west again, but every step now echoed hollow. By the time I reached Krakow, I had become someone else. I changed my name, sold my service to whoever paid in food or silence. I joined a smuggling group that ferried displaced families across the border into Czechoslovakia. They called it humanitarian work. I called it penance. At night, when the others slept, I would take out the photo, the one from before. The corners were frayed, her smile half faded, but her eyes still held the softness I once knew. Each time I looked at it, guilt turned to justification, then to numbness. Because that's what war does. It teaches you how to kill memory. But memory fights back. There was a girl once, maybe 15, who reminded me of Anna. We were crossing a frozen river. She slipped, fell through the ice, and I couldn't reach her. I watched her hand disappear beneath the current, the same hand that had held mine for balance moments before. That night, I dreamt of Anna's hand, also sinking. When I woke, I vomited into the snow. From then on, I stopped speaking her name. I became efficient, silent, useful. Every refugee I guided to safety was another letter I didn't send. Every border crossed was another confession delayed. But the human heart, no matter how buried, has a way of whispering when the world goes quiet. Months later, we were ambushed near the Czech border by partisans who thought we were looters. They stripped us, tied us, and demanded names. One of them found the photo in my pocket. "Your wife?" he asked. I said nothing. He tore it in half. That small act hurt more than the beatings that followed. Because in that instant, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding since the moment I pulled the trigger. It wasn't Anna's betrayal that destroyed me. It was mine. I had deserted the front to save love, only to kill what love remained. When they released us days later, I walked alone. The others went north, I went west. Into exile. Into silence. Somewhere near the border, I burned the remains of the photo. The ash drifted like snow. For a moment, it looked as though winter had returned. Soft, innocent, forgiving. I slept by the river that night, dreaming of her face, pale beneath the weight of years. When I woke, my pistol was gone. Maybe stolen, maybe taken by mercy itself. They say time heals, but time doesn't heal. It erases. Slowly, relentlessly, until you forget what the wound even meant. I crossed into France under a false name, Jan Kowalski, the most forgettable man I could invent. I found work repairing rail engines, sleeping in stations, eating whatever bread the station master threw away. The noise of trains soothed me. They reminded me of purpose, of motion without meaning. At night, when the world was asleep, I wrote letters to Anna. Dozens, hundreds, never sent. Some began with apology, others with accusation. Most ended the same way. From the ghost you made. I wrote not to her, but to the version of myself that had died that winter. Every letter was an exorcism. Every sentence a prayer for someone I no longer deserved to miss. France was supposed to be exile, not rebirth. But the body doesn't understand punishment the way the mind does. It still hungers. It still wants to forget. I found work at a rail yard near Lyon, where displaced men like me built the bones of other people's lives. Steel tracks stretching toward cities that had forgiven themselves faster than I ever could. My French was broken, but my hands were fluent in repair. I fixed engines, boilers, lamps, everything but myself. The foreman was a kind man named René. He said, "You Poles are made of iron." I wanted to tell him iron rusts too. He introduced me to a woman, his sister, Lucille, who ran the cafe near the station. She had brown hair always pinned back, and a voice that made even silence feel warm. The first time I went there, she poured coffee and said, "You look like a man who listens more than he speaks." I answered, "Only because I've said too much before." She laughed. That laugh was the first sound in years that didn't echo. Weeks turned to months. I became a regular, the foreign mechanic with the quiet eyes. She began saving me the last slice of bread at closing time. I began staying later, helping her clean, pretending I didn't notice how her hand brushed mine when passing plates. We never spoke of the war. She thought I'd lost a family back home. I let her believe that. It was easier than saying I'd lost myself. One night, after too many glasses of cheap wine, she asked if I still wrote letters. I nodded. She smiled and said, "Then one day, write one for me." I said I would. I never did. Because I knew every letter I wrote still belonged to Anna. Still, desire doesn't wait for permission. It began one night when rain hammered the roof like artillery. She locked the door early, said the roads were flooded, that I could stay till morning. We sat near the stove, sharing a bottle. The smell of coffee and damp wool filled the air. Her hand found mine. My first instinct was to pull away, to protect her from the ghost beside her. But she didn't see the ghost. She saw only a man trying to breathe again. When her lips touched mine, I felt nothing at first. Then too much. It was not love. It was anesthesia. We began an affair built on silence. She asked nothing about my past, and I gave her everything but truth. In her arms, I pretended to be someone who could be forgiven. I even started to laugh again, a sound I hadn't trusted in years. But guilt has its own schedule. It waits for stillness. At night, after she fell asleep, I'd rise quietly and stare at her bookshelf. There was a copy of Les Miserables, a story of a man who broke the law and spent his life seeking redemption. I read it in secret, line by line, until I reached the part where the hero dies forgiven. I closed the book and wept. Not because I envied his forgiveness, but because I knew mine would never come. The town began to whisper. Lucille was single and I was foreign. 2 sins enough to spark suspicion. One afternoon, a French officer came into the cafe. He looked at me too long, his eyes tracing the accent in my silence. "You fought?" he asked. "Yes." "For which side?" "Whichever one let me live." He didn't laugh. He left coins on the table and said, "Be careful which ghosts you invite to dinner." After that, Lucille asked me to move in with her. Not from love, but from fear. And I agreed, not from courage, but convenience. We became domestic strangers. I fixed things, she cooked. Sometimes we made love with the tenderness of refugees who know the past is always watching. But every time she touched my face, I saw Anna's hand, trembling, stained with blood. Then came the day everything cracked. A letter arrived from Poland. The handwriting was familiar. I opened it slowly, the way one diffuses a mine. "Jakub, they said you died at the front. Then they said you killed a man. I don't know which is true. I live now with silence and cold. If ghosts can read, forgive me. Ah." The world blurred. My lungs forgot air. Lucille found me staring at it, paper shaking between my fingers. She asked who it was from. I said, no one. She didn't believe me. That night, I drank until the walls breathed. When she touched my shoulder, I turned and said words I didn't mean. Cruel, slurred things about ghosts and coats and betrayal. She cried quietly, then said the one sentence I could never forgive. "You think you're the only one who's lost." The next morning she was gone. The cafe was closed, the bed still warm. On the table, she left Les Miserables. Inside, a note. Some people spend their lives trying to be forgiven. Others just need to start living. I stared at that line until the ink blurred with tears. Then I walked to the river, carrying the note, the letter, and my own breathlessness. I wanted to drown. Not to die, but to be washed clean. The current was strong. I stepped in, chest deep, until the cold burned. Then I stopped. Because in the sound of the rushing water, I heard something. A faint whisper. A woman's voice. Maybe Anna's, maybe Lucille's, maybe my own. It said only one thing. Enough. I crawled back to the shore. From that day, I stopped writing letters. I worked. I ate. I slept. But something inside me began to quiet. Not healed, but surrendered. That was indulgence's final trick. You think you're living again, when really you're only surviving more elegantly. It began with a hiss. Boilers always warn you before they break. A thin seam of steam. A breath no one hears unless they've lived beside machines their whole life. I heard it that morning at the rail yard, high and pleading. The sound of metal about to fail. "Cut the feed!" I shouted. René waved, half listening, cigarette in his mouth. The apprentice, a boy named Emile, 17, hands like fledglings, reached for the wrong valve. The tank bucked. For one white second, the world turned to snow. Then sound returned as shrapnel. When silence fell again, the boy was on the ground, blood marbling the dust, his eyes huge with surprise that the day had opened a door he wasn't meant to enter. He was still breathing. I tore my shirt, pressed the cloth, begged him to stay. He whispered, "Does it hurt to die?" I told him, "Less than it hurts to stay." Lies are easier when they are kind. He died before the ambulance arrived. The foreman's face looked like someone had hammered it from the inside. "You heard it," he said to me later, in the office that smelled of ink and loss. "You warned us." And yet he's dead. It wasn't blame, it was arithmetic. Two truths side by side. I had tried. A boy was gone. That night, the whole town drank, and the silence inside me drank more. I walked home along the river, collar turned up against a wind that kept saying my name in the language of the guilty. On the bridge, I stopped and stared at the black water until it stared back. Anna's letter burned in my coat pocket like a coal I refused to drop. At home, the cafe door was still locked. Lucille hadn't returned. The chair where she used to leave her apron looked like a question left standing after everyone has gone. I sat on the floor and read Emil's name aloud until the sound lost meaning. In the days after the accident, inspectors came. They asked for maintenance logs, for signatures, for the past to sit still long enough to be measured. My records were clean. I had always been careful with paper, if not with people. Still, one of them held my file too long, as if it weighed more than ink. "Jan Kowalski," he said, tasting the name, listening for the accent it concealed. "Where in Poland?" "Łódź," I answered, and felt the room tilt. "My wife's cousin fought there," he said, softening. "War makes foreigners of us all." When he left, relief lasted only a breath. Because the problem wasn't papers. The problem was the boy in the yard, and the man in the bedroom, and the woman in the coat, and the letters I hadn't mailed, and the ghost I kept feeding with bread meant for the living. I stopped sleeping. In the hours that used to belong to dreams, I repaired lanterns no one had broken. I folded Emil's rag and unfolded it again, as if somewhere between the motions a body might reassemble. I tried to pray and found only nouns. Name, coat, shot, river. On the third night, a knock. Not a gentle one. I opened the door to find a policeman and a priest. The policeman adjusted his hat. The priest looked like a man who had been given a secret he did not want. "Madame Lucille asked us to check on you," the priest said. "She's back?" "She is concerned," he replied. "She says you spoke of drowning." "I spoke of washing," I said. "It's different." The policeman took my wrists in his eyes. Different becomes the same when the water is deep. He did not arrest me. He wrote my name down carefully, the way one writes the title of a book they intend to finish later. After they left, I opened the stove and fed it paper. Receipts, drafts of letters, a drawing Emil had made of a train that looked like it wanted to be a bird. Fire reads without judgment. Morning brought a small mercy, a telegram. "Sister ill. Return urgently. Renee." The war taught me to run toward orders. I packed what remained of me into a canvas sack and boarded the noon train to a village 2 hours south. The carriage smelled of coal and the perfume of women who would learn to live with ash. The sister was not dying. She needed a roof repaired and no money to pay men who charged more for roofs than for funerals. Renee had lied to save me from my apartment. I hammered tiles into place while the sun hammered me in return. At dusk, we drank cider and didn't mention boys or boilers. A week away became 2. On the last night, I walked to the church alone and sat in the back pew. Confessionals always look to me like little houses for people who cannot afford bigger mercy. The priest slid open the lattice. He smelled of soap and old wine. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," I said in French that still limped. "How long since your last confession?" "An entire country ago," I said. I told him nothing with names and everything with weight. I said I had killed a man I did not hate, and I had loved a woman I did not deserve, and I had chosen my heart over my oath and then broken both. I told him about the boy at the rail yard who died because men do not always listen to the right hiss. He did not ask for dates, he asked for verbs. Did you intend? Did you lie? Did you love? He gave me 5 Our Fathers and 3 Hail Marys, and the suggestion to write a letter to the living, not the dead. To whom? I asked. To the mother of the man you killed, if she breathes. If not, to the man he might have become. I left the booth lighter by exactly the weight of the door. The moon above the nave looked like a saint who had walked too far and forgotten why. Back in Lyon, the café was open. Lucille stood behind the counter, face thinner, voice careful. "You were gone," she said. "I was a danger to myself." "To yourself?" She put a cup down hard enough to make it ring. "To everyone." She told me she had gone to the countryside to escape my absence, a paradox I understood too well. We circled the subject like 2 cats who both want the same warm chair and know there is no fair way to share it. Finally, she said, "Stay if you can be kind. Go if you cannot." That night I slept on the floor by choice because the bed had too many ghosts and the floor had only dust. Somewhere toward morning, I dreamt the officer I shot was watering roses from the balcony in the mayor's house. He turned to me, smiled like a boy, and asked if I liked music. I woke to a sound that took me a moment to name. A knock. Another knock, harder. I opened the door to find a man in a heavy coat slick with rain. He spoke my real name before I could hide it. Jakub Lesniak. My mouth forgot French. Kto pyta? Who asks? Someone who owes a debt, he said in Polish. And someone who comes to collect. He stepped inside, water pooling at his boots. You killed my brother, he said. He was 20. He protected a woman in our town. He kept her alive. And then you came home. His hand moved toward his coat. I felt the room turn to winter. The door behind him stayed open. The rain kept speaking. He reached into the coat and pulled out a letter. He threw it on the table. She wrote to you. She asked me to find you. She cannot forgive what you did, but she cannot keep carrying it alone. He paused, eyes on the stove as if measuring what fire could do to paper. She said your words will not fix anything, but they will let the dead rest. He left before I could thank him. He left the door open like a wound. I sat down while the rain finished saying whatever rain says when men run out of words. The envelope was thin, already damp at the edges, addressed to Jan but shaped by Jakub. Inside, one sheet. I light a candle for him, and for you. Some nights I cannot tell which flame is which. If you are alive, write. Tell me you remember the boy's name. A. I said the name aloud, and it broke in my mouth like bread. I said it again, and it melted. I found a pen. I pulled paper toward me like air. My hand hovered, then began. Anna. Something shook the window, sharp as a shell. The glass rattled. I stood, heart racing toward a memory that had already arrived. Outside, headlights, footsteps, a voice at the door. Police. The letter trembled in my fingers. The stove breathed. I did not move. The handle turned. The world narrowed to the size of a keyhole. I opened the door. 2 officers, one older, rain in his mustache, one younger, already tired in the eyes. The older one spoke first. Monsieur Kowalski, he began, and I was suddenly grateful for the lie that had at least bought me a gentler address. We have questions about the accident at the yard. There were irregularities. My mouth tasted of ash and letters. I warned them, I said. We know, he answered, but the inspector wants your statement at the prefecture tomorrow at 9. They did not search the room. They did not ask about Poland. Sometimes the present chooses mercy because it doesn't yet know the past is standing behind it with a knife. When they left, I closed the door and leaned my head against the wood. The letter on the table waited. I sat and began to write, because I understood then that the only way to survive the morning was to finish the night. Anna, you asked for his name. I have said it until it bled. Mikhail. He was younger than the winter. He spoke Russian to the morning and Polish to the evening. He saved you. I took him. There is nothing after that sentence that can make it square. But I will not let silence be the last accountant of this debt. I told her the truth I had rehearsed in 1,000 unwritten drafts. That I had deserted for love, arrived with a gun still singing the song the front had taught it, and fired reflex before thought, because war had made my hands believe they knew the answer to every question. I wrote about the coat and the candle, and the way the candle stuttered after the shot like a child who has been taught not to cry. I wrote about exile in a language not my own, about a cafe where forgiveness smelled like burnt coffee, about a boy who died because men cannot always turn the right way in time. I wrote about the priest who weighed verbs and measured me lighter than I deserved. I did not ask for forgiveness. I asked for a place to put the weight. When the ink began to thin, I warmed the pen by the stove as if truth were another liquid that only needed heat to flow. I signed the letter not with the old coward's signature, not the ghost you made, but the only honest one I had left, from the man I became. At dawn, I took the letter to the post. The clerk stamped it with a thud that felt like a small gavel. Judgment begun. At 9, I sat in a narrow room at the prefecture, answering questions about valves and gauges. The inspector asked if I had been drinking that morning. No, I said. He asked if I had enemies at the yard. Only entropy, I answered. He didn't smile. In the end, he nodded. A bureaucratic absolution. Negligence by the team, not by you. You are released. Release is not freedom. It is simply a door that opens onto the same corridor. Outside, the sky had forgotten how to be blue. I walked to the church, not because I believed sacraments could erase bullets, but because I needed someone to witness my vow. The priest who had heard me before was sweeping the nave. Dust rose like small spirits and seemed grateful to be named. I wrote, I told him. And did you tell the truth? As much as I'm brave enough to remember. He rested the broom. Truth is not a stone you drop once. It is a well you draw from whenever thirst returns. In the afternoon, I returned to the cafe. Lucille watched me as one watches a storm men say is passing. Are you staying? She asked. I am confessing, I said. Staying or going will come after. I told her everything, not because she asked, but because I could not keep asking her for warmth while feeding her shadows. I told her about Anna, about Mikhail, about the letter already on its way east. When I finished, she took off her apron, folded it, and placed it between us like a small white flag. I cannot be your penance, she said. I'm not asking you to be, I answered. I'm asking you to be a witness while I stop being a ghost. She looked at me a long time. If you stay, you must live, not haunt. I will try, I said, and meant it in the poor, trembling way men mean vows they fear they cannot keep, but want to. That evening, I returned to the room above the cafe and opened the window to let the ghosts out. The city smelled of iron and bread and a coming rain. I cleaned the table where I had almost been arrested by the past. I set a fresh page down and wrote only one sentence. If no reply comes, I will accept the silence as the answer. Days became a slow procession of small obediences. Work done without haste. Meals eaten without hiding. Prayers said without bargains. I spoke Emil's name each time I passed the yard. I whispered Mikhail's each time I lit a match. On the 8th day, a letter arrived. Polish stamps. My hands shook so fiercely I had to sit. Lucille placed it in my palm and left the room, the way a nurse closes the door when she knows the medicine will either save or kill. Inside, thin paper, neat script. I knew better than my own. Jakub. His name was Mikhail Borovsky. He loved music. He cried when the snow was too beautiful. He kept a pencil behind his ear like a carpenter of mornings. He saved me from being taken. He died because you had not yet learned the difference between fear and love. I cannot forgive you in the way the church teaches. But I can choose what to do with our shared winter. Do not sign your letters as a ghost again. Write, if you must, as a man who breathes. A. I read it once as a sentence, twice as a sentence served. The absence of absolution was cleaner than any pardon. It did not release me. It made me responsible. I walked to the bridge at dusk. The river moved with the slow authority of time. I took the last of the old signatures from my pocket, scraps with "The ghost you made" scrawled like a curse, and let them go. Paper spun, caught light, vanished. When I returned to the cafe, a final letter was waiting. Not from Anna, not from the prefecture. From René. He had written 3 lines. We have found another yard, near the coast. They rebuild with patience. They need a man who listens to hisses. Will you come? I stood with the letter between finger and future. The door to the street was open. The night smelled of salt if you pretended hard enough. Will you go? Lucille asked from the doorway. I don't know, I said. I only know I cannot stay being what I was. The room held its breath. The handle of my suitcase gleamed like a question. Between staying and going, I chose, not yet. I chose to fold the letter, set it by the lamp, and sleep with the window open, because you cannot decide a life on the same breath that confesses it. I turned down the lamp. The dark settled the way a hand settles on a shoulder, warning, then comfort. In the street, someone laughed. I did not flinch. And then, as if scripted by a kinder war, a knock at the door. The knock was René. "You didn't answer the letter," he said, already smiling enough for both of us. "So I came to collect the rest of your yes." We took a train west. The tracks threaded through towns, stitching themselves back together one roof at a time. At the new yard near the coast, the air tasted of iron and salt, the earth's two simplest confessions. The men there worked slowly, as if slowness itself were an act of respect for everything speed had broken. I rented a room over a bakery. Each morning the dough rose and reminded me that transformation is not a miracle, but a series of small, disciplined surrenders to warmth. I wrote once a week to Anna, brief letters with verbs and no excuses. I worked, I fixed. I remembered Mikhail by name when the wind was kind. Sometimes she replied with weather reports and mentions of the candles she still lit. The absence of questions between us was not coldness. It was a truce that allowed the living to live. Lucille visited in spring. She stood in the doorway, bringing with her the familiar shape of a room I had forfeited. We walked the harbor and spoke like people who had forgiven each other for not becoming one life. At the pier, she took my hand once, briefly, so that the memory would be tidy, not ragged, not a torn promise. Just a hand meeting a hand and letting go. "You're less a ghost," she said, and kissed my cheek as if endorsing a passport. At the yard, I trained apprentices to hear what steel says before it fails. I wrote Emile in chalk on the frame of the boiler, not visible to inspectors, only to those who looked with care. "Why do you tap twice?" one boy asked. "Because the first tap is to wake the metal," I said. "The second is to hear if it has a fever." "And if it does?" "Then we cool it," I answered. "Or we rest." He nodded like someone being handed a family secret. On Sundays, I swept the little chapel by the docks. I replaced a rope on the bell and rang it once. The note traveled out over water, a coin tossed into the old wish that names might one day be lighter to carry. I said them aloud in order. Mikhail, Emile, the unnamed others whose faces I could not place, but whose weight I felt in my shoulders when it rained. From Poland, a final letter arrived the year the sea decided to be generous with its light. The page was thin, the handwriting tired but steady. "Jakub, I married. He is kind. We keep his photograph on the mantel, the one where he is not yet a soldier. When the first snow comes, I open the window and let the cold in, so that nothing beautiful can be accused of being a lie. I am not writing to forgive, I am writing so that the names do not lose their shape in our mouths. Be a good man where you are. That is the only revenge worth anything against the winter. A. I read it on the pier, the wind trying to steal it, and me letting it try a little, because struggle is part of ceremony. I folded the page and put it in the pocket of my coat. A different coat, a humbler one, with no memory in its lining except the warmth of the present tense. That evening, a train whistled somewhere inland, a long, humane sound that seemed to have learned to mourn without rehearsing the cry. I walked home along streets that had forgiven themselves for once believing war was the only language men valued, and I put on water for tea. At the table, I wrote my last unsent letter. Not to Anna, not to Lucille, not to any border official who might one day ask why my papers smelled faintly of sorrow. I wrote to the man I had been when I walked through winter, to a door that opened onto a sentence I will carry to my last breath. Jakub, we are not absolved. We are accounted for. You fired when you should have spoken. You ran when you should have waited. You loved as if love were rations, hoarded for fear of tomorrow. Now listen, none of that prevents you from changing the sound of your name when you answer it. Work. Rest. Remember. Teach the boys to hear the hiss before the heat. Let the bell ring once and never in triumph. When you sign your letters, do not be clever, be accurate. Sign them simply. A man who breathes. I slept well that night, not because the past had closed its eyes, but because it had learned to stop shaking me awake. Years later, when the sea took me into its older, colder joke, I left behind a small tin box under the floorboard by the window. Inside, a pencil, a photograph of a balcony without blood, one page from a maintenance log with Emil's name circled, and a bell rope knot tied, the way sailors tie hope to mast. Whoever finds it will not know the story. They will only know a man kept certain things close. That is enough. In the morning, the yard was already speaking, the low music of steel and men. I stood at the threshold and said the names once more, not to punish myself, not to prove anything, but to place them in the day like tools. Then I walked forward. Somewhere far away, snow might have been falling on a town that had learned to pronounce quiet without shame. Somewhere closer, a woman in a cafe might have been smiling at a man who had finally decided to stop rehearsing his exit. I buttoned my coat, this one mine, ordinary, patient, and stepped into work. The air carried salt and the honest threat of heat. I listened. Tap, tap. The metal answered, steady. And for the first time in a long time, I signed nothing at all. I simply breathed.